Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery.
All right, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be unlocking some magic. Well, the magic of facilitation. We're diving into Unlocking the Magic of Facilitation. It's by Sam Killermann and Meg Bolger. And even if you don't, consider yourself a facilitator, this book has so many good insights that you can apply to any group situation you're in. From team meetings to even family dinners to, those conversations where everybody has a different opinion.
Yeah. I think what really got me about this book was it doesn't focus on any specific content area. It just gives you this framework for creating dialogue.
Yeah.
And creating a genuine connection, no matter what you're talking about.
It's like they give you a master key to unlock any door. And they start off with a story that really kind of sets the stage. They're facilitating a town hall in a rural town, and it's all about LGBTQ plus inclusion. Yeah, and you can just feel the tension. And they even talk about the skeptical welder in the room who's sitting there with his arms crossed and not really sure about this whole inclusivity thing.
Yeah. And that's what's so cool about their approach is they don't try to shut him down or force some kind of opinion on him. They actually use their facilitation skills to draw him out.
Yeah.
And they let him voice his discomfort while still challenging his assumptions. And they end up weaving his experience of feeling unwelcome into this larger conversation about inclusivity.
Yeah, and they make this point that striving for neutrality as a facilitator is almost impossible.
Right. They say it's like starting a sentence with no offense, but, and expecting no one to be offended. We all have biases. And pretending to be neutral can actually do more harm than good.
Right.
What they advocate for is being upfront about those biases, acknowledging them so you can create a more honest and inclusive environment.
It's like saying, hey, we're all bringing something to the table here, so let's just put it all out in the open. And they have this really fantastic analogy about reading a group. They compare it to looking at one of those pop-up books.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen those?
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, so it's not just about the words people say.
Yeah.
But it's also their body language.
Yeah.
And those shifts in energy. It's like those little pop-up moments that tell you what's really going on beneath the surface.
I love that visual, the pop-up book. And they also talk about, sometimes we have this urge to just jump in and fix everything as a facilitator, which I think we're all guilty of sometimes.
Yeah.
But they give us this acronym.
Oh, I love acronyms. Me too.
It's WHALE.
Okay.
Which stands for wait, hesitate, ask, listen, and explain.
I like that. That's good. That's a good reminder to pause and give people space.
Yes, to share their thoughts fully. Okay, so this next point, this one really resonated with me. They talk about replacing the word but with and in conversations. I'm sure we've all been in that situation where someone will use the word but to kind of shut down any alternative viewpoint.
Yeah, like they're trying to win an argument instead of having a conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. And they give this perfect example of a discussion about climate change. Someone will bring up a recent blizzard as evidence against global warming, right? And they're like, well, look, it's snowing. How can there be global warming?
Right.
But the facilitator could easily say, but the scientific evidence. But instead, they use the word and to acknowledge the concern about the blizzard and the long-term data.
So it allows for more nuance in the conversation.
Exactly. And it creates a bridge, but creates a wall and creates a bridge. So speaking of building bridges, they bring in this classic improv rule, yes and. Have you ever used that?
In real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, especially when you have a potentially contentious discussion. They have this great analogy where they compare participant contributions to a child's artwork.
Okay.
Even if it's not, a masterpiece. You wouldn't just dismiss it.
Right.
You'd find something positive to say. You'd acknowledge the effort.
Right. You wouldn't say, that's a terrible drawing.
Exactly. Go back and do it again.
You'd be like, oh, I love the colors you used. Tell me about this.
Right. What were you thinking when you drew this?
Exactly. Yeah. It's about finding a way to honor someone's perspective.
Yeah.
While also gently. Introducing.
Additional information.
Or viewpoints.
And they give an example of how to use this in a discussion about something as sensitive as abstinence-only sex education.
Wow.
Which is a very sensitive topic.
This brings us to the idea of, creating a safe space for vulnerability.
Right.
That can feel really risky.
Yeah.
For both the facilitator and the participants.
It can. But they offer some really cool safety nets. to help us navigate that risk.
Right.
One of the big ones is learning to manage our triggers. They have this clever analogy of a traffic circle.
Ooh, I get roundabout anxiety.
Yeah, so do I.
No.
Imagine you're driving
Yeah.
and suddenly you encounter a roundabout and you weren't prepared for it. It can feel very overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Roundabouts are the worst.
No, unless you know where you're going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our triggers are kind of like those roundabouts. They can throw us into a tailspin if we don't know how to navigate them effectively.
So we just keep going around and around.
And around and around.
Exactly. And they break it down. They break down the triggering event cycle into 7 different steps, starting with the initial trigger and ending with a reaction. That could potentially trigger someone else or even ourselves again.
Right. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah. But they give us the exits.
Okay.
Right?
We can get off the roundabout.
We can get off the roundabout.
Yeah.
And they offer strategies to help us choose a more skillful response, like separating the actual reality of a situation from the story we're telling ourselves about it.
Right. Because sometimes our thoughts aren't necessarily true.
Exactly. We make up stories.
And sometimes we believe those stories.
Right. And we get stuck in those stories.
We get stuck in those stories.
And they also talk about practicing non-reactive responses, like taking a deep breath before responding instead of just like
firing back.
Yeah, like knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
And they even suggest naming our reactions and apologizing if we react in a way that might be harmful.
Right.
It's all about taking responsibility for our own stuff.
Yes.
I love how they emphasize that. We have a choice in how we respond to triggers. We're not just victims of our emotions. We can learn to manage them.
Right.
And choose a more skillful path.
Okay, so besides managing those roundabout triggers, they also talk about learning from emotions. And they actually challenge the idea that emotions are these disruptive forces.
Yeah.
In learning environments, like we're always told, don't be so emotional. Don't let your emotions get in the way.
Check your emotions at the door.
Yeah.
Right.
Leave them outside.
But actually, if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, they're suggesting that emotions can actually be incredibly valuable learning tools.
Yeah. So recognizing and understanding our emotions can help us deepen our understanding of the material we're discussing, enhance empathy and connection with others, and it can even foster personal growth.
It's a total reframe. It's like they're saying, don't suppress your emotions, bring your emotions to the table. Let's see what they can teach us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they even offer a 5-step process for integrating emotions into learning. Recognize, name, validate, explore, and integrate.
Wow.
It's about creating a space where those emotions are welcomed and explored.
Not shut down.
Not shut down.
Yeah.
And they highlight the importance of asking good social questions, questions that invite reflection and exploration rather than judgment or dismissal.
Last but not least, they tackle this whole myth of the expert. And I think this is something we all struggle with, this pressure to have all the answers all the time. But they actually encourage us to embrace continuous learning and challenge that whole expert idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's so fascinating about this is they say, true expertise lies not in being a know-it-all, but in recognizing how much we don't know.
Right.
It's about being open to new perspectives, being willing to say, I don't know, and modeling that humility for others.
Yeah.
So it's okay to not know everything.
Yeah, it's much more freeing to say, I don't know, and then be open to learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing how much we don't know and being open to discovering more.
That's such a great point. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but I think we've only just scratched the surface of what this book has to offer, but I think it's a good place to stop for now, and we'll pick up in the next part of this deep dive into unlocking the magic of facilitation. So it's okay to not know everything and be open to learning. So for those of us who maybe took some notes, during that first part, let's recap some of the key takeaways. From unlocking the magic of facilitation, we talked about how facilitation is so much more than just presenting information. It's really about creating an environment where genuine dialogue and connection can flourish.
Right. It's like that town hall example. You know, it wasn't about converting the skeptical welder. It was about creating a space where he felt heard and respected, even with his differing views.
Yeah. And that ties into the whole myth of neutrality. Instead of striving for some impossible standard of being completely neutral, the authors encourage us to be open and honest, about our biases.
Yeah.
And that creates a more authentic space for everyone.
Absolutely.
And then we have that amazing pop-up book analogy.
I love that one.
Yeah. For reading a group, it's a great reminder to pay attention, not just to the words being said, but also the body language, the energy shifts, all those little hidden flaps that reveal what's really going on beneath the surface.
Yeah. It's not just about the words, it's about everything else too.
Exactly. What about the power of and over, but I mean?
Yeah.
That was a big one for me. It's like shifting from a me versus you mindset to a we're in this together approach.
Right. It's about creating a space where multiple perspectives can coexist.
Yeah.
Like the climate change example, you can acknowledge the blizzard. And the scientific data, you don't have to dismiss anyone's concerns. You can find a way to bridge those seemingly opposing views.
Yeah. And then there's the yes and rule.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm starting to realize is like this secret weapon for better conversations.
It is. It's about acknowledging and building on each other's ideas, even if they seem a little out there at first.
Yeah. It's like, remember that analogy of treating participant contributions like a child's artwork, even if it's not a Picasso, there's value in acknowledging the effort and finding something positive to build upon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about those safety nets for vulnerability. Because let's be honest, putting yourself out there can feel scary.
It can.
But the authors remind us that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's actually courage.
Absolutely.
And they give us all these tools to navigate those potentially treacherous waters.
Right. Like those roundabout triggers, I mean, they can really throw us off course if we're not careful.
Yeah. But if we understand the triggering event cycle and they start utilizing those exits that the authors give us, we can regain control.
Yeah.
Choose a more skillful response.
So instead of spiraling, we can take breath.
Exactly.
We can separate reality from the story we're telling ourselves.
Yes.
And choose a path that leads to a more productive outcome.
Right.
And then there's the power of learning from emotions.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we've been taught to suppress our emotions, but the authors are saying, hey, let's invite them to the table. Let's see what they have to teach us.
What can we learn from our emotions instead of just trying to shove them down?
Exactly. And remember that 5-step process for integrating emotions into learning.
Oh, yeah.
Recognize, name, validate, explore, and integrate.
That's so good. I love it.
It's about creating a space where those emotions are welcomed and explored.
Not shut down.
Not shut down. And then finally, we have that myth of the expert. You know, this idea that we need to have all the answers all the time.
All the time.
But the authors encourage us to embrace continuous learning and to challenge that whole expert mentality.
Right. It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers. Being open to new perspectives.
Yeah.
And being willing to say, I don't know.
Right.
And that's not a weakness. It's actually a strength.
It's recognizing how much we don't know and being open to discovering more.
Exactly.
Which is a much more exciting way to approach learning and facilitation.
I think so.
Yeah, it's way more fun that way.
Definitely.
It's like, you know, when we first started this deep dive, I thought we were going to be talking about how to run meetings or workshops, but it feels like we've uncovered so much more. It's like a whole new way of approaching conversations and relationships in general.
I think that's a great point. You know, these principles from unlocking the magic of facilitation, they can really be so many areas of our lives.
Yeah.
You know, it's about bringing that same intentionality and presence to any interaction where you're trying to create connection and understanding.
So as we wrap up this episode, I want to challenge you to think about a recent group situation you were in. It could be a meeting at work or even a family dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Was there a moment where things got a little heated or maybe someone felt shut down? How could you have used one of the concepts from this book to make that experience better?
Right. Like, could you have replaced a but with an and to acknowledge a different perspective? Or maybe use the yes and rule to build on someone's idea, even if you didn't initially agree with it.
I bet if we all started incorporating even just one of these techniques into our daily interactions, it would make a huge difference.
You would.
It's like we're all facilitators in some way.
We are.
Whether we realize it or not.
We are all facilitators.
No. Until next time, keep diving deep, keep exploring, and keep unlocking that magic within yourselves and in the world around you.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast. your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.